Alright, so let's get Node.js installed on our Mac machines. If you're running Windows or Linux, you can skip to one of the other parts of this live lesson, or you can just follow along if you're curious how it works on the Macs. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to go to our web browser and visit nodejs.org. If you click on the install button here, it'll download an installer, and 99% of the time it's going to pick exactly the right one for your platform. If you want sort of some finer degree of control over it, or you want to just sort of see what your options are, you can click on the download link and go to the downloads page and sort of pick from your choices there. The Mac OS installer package that we're going to use is universal. If you want to just download separate binaries, you can do that, but we are always just going to stick with the universal installer for this part right now because it does exactly what we want it to do. So I've already downloaded the installer here for Node 0.10.3. By the time you come and view this live lesson and run this installer, Node 0.10.3 is almost certainly going to be out of date and no longer the current version. Don't worry about this. The Node team runs on very short development cycles and is constantly pushing out new builds. As long as you're running one of the even-numbered sub-builds, you'll be on a stable branch that will work just fine for you and probably be perfectly good. The way they have it is even-numbered branches are sort of stable release branches like 0.8, 0.10, and 0.12, and then the odd-numbered branches are what are called sort of development or experimental branches like 0.9, 0.11, and 0.13. So as long as you're running one of the even-numbered ones, you'll be running a stable one. It'll be great. And also, the Node team is pretty good about maintaining compatibility between the different builds. And when there are changes that will break some code between them, we will show you some strategies throughout these live lessons to sort of stay ahead of those, stay on top of those, and try to maximize your or minimize the amount of time you waste sort of dealing with these changes between the new versions of Node. So you can go ahead and run through this installer here. It's pretty standard. There's really nothing new or scary or something like that. It'll probably ask for the root password here and everything. So that's great. That's all going to get it installed and everything like that. Now the way we're going to test that installation is we're going to bring up a terminal prompt here. If you've not run this program before, it is under Applications, Utilities. You'll see here that terminal is the right there at the end, and I can run that and I'll get this. Now there's some standard commands you can run. If you've never really worked with terminals, definitely spend a little bit of time, go search the internet for a tutorial or sort of a suggestion of the best practices or sort of how to get familiar with running that, because a lot of the Node development we're going to be doing is done on the command line here like this. So let's go ahead and test our Node installation, and the way we're going to do that is by typing node-version. And you should see that we have Node 0.10. I actually just I'm running the slightly older version that I installed a week or so ago. So it's not the 10.3, but it is still Node 0.10. I also want you to go ahead and verify that you have a program called npm, which is the Node package manager, and we're going to see that in a later lesson. And you should see that you have a pretty recent version of that as well. Now, let's say if you type node and you actually see bash node command not found, either it didn't install or it's possible that your path is messed up. So you can actually echo path here in our terminal window, and you want to make sure that some common entries like user bin and specifically here user local bin are installed. So if I see that node won't run when I type node-version, the next thing I can do is I can try user local bin node-version. If that works, but just node by itself didn't work, that almost certainly means that user local bin is not in your path. And the way I add that is I use my favorite text editor to edit a file called bash profile. And here we actually have our sort of path spec and everything. And again, you'll want to make sure that user local bin is in that. if you do add that, and it wasn't there before, then you'll need to launch a new terminal window. You can hit Command N to launch a new one. And then if I echo path and make it a little bit bigger so everybody can read it, you'll see now that for sure user local bin is there. So that's how we make sure that Node is installed and npm are installed, and we're ready to go with that. Now, I'd like to cover the installation for people who don't want to run the binary installer, but instead would like to install it from source code. Perhaps they'd like to patch the code themselves, or they'd otherwise like to just have supremely fine control over the whole process. I've already downloaded the source code here for Node 0.10.3, oopsie, in this tarball here. So I can do tar xfz node.tar. Should take a couple of seconds, and you'll now see I have this folder there. So I'll cd node. Now, one thing you need to do before you run the installer and everything is type G++. If everything works correctly, I should see blah, 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 no input files. What that means is G++ ran and is complaining that I didn't give it an actual file name to run. If I type G++ and I get this command not found error here again when I run G++, Mac machines no longer come with the compilers as part of the default OS installation. This was a change from actually maybe they never did, but Xcode, if you installed Xcode, it would. But even now, that it doesn't even do that by default. So they don't come with a compiler toolset by default. So what you need to do is you need to actually open/applications Xcode. On your machine, you need to go to the App Store and download the latest version of Xcode and get ready to run that. Once you go to that, you need to go to the sort of menus, the Xcode menu, go to Preferences, and you'll get this Preferences dialog, and you'll probably start out here in General. You need to go to this Downloads page, and you need to click on here, Command Line Tools, and you need to click on Install. You'll see here my tools are actually out of date because it is saying I can install a new version or a new set of the tools if you want. So once you click that install and you install them, and you see that G++ is now there and everything like that, you can continue with this step of compiling and installing Node.js. Now, the good news is it's very, very easy. All I want to do in the beginning is run this config tool. Oopsie. And it's now configure. Sorry. I always get those confused. So run configure. The default options and choices are perfectly reasonable. You don't actually need to change anything. And what I'm going to do now is do make and, well, actually, we'll leave that till the end. So I'm going to run make, and I'm going to go get a coffee because this is going to take, 3 or 4 minutes or something like that. Note to whoever's editing, I hope we can kind of fade out this stuff, and then in about 3 or 4 minutes we can fade back in when all of this is done. I'll give you a, how do you say in English? I'll let you know in a few minutes when we should sort of fade back in and start recording. All right, this is Mark, and we're back, and I hope we can just fade back into here. All right, I'm back from my cup of coffee, and the compile is done. So now to install it, all I need to do is do sudo make install. I need to do the sudo here because to put it, excuse me, in the default location of user local bin, I need super user privileges to do that. And on Mac, by default, all of our programs do not run as the super user. So I'll do that. I'll enter in my root password. It'll do a bunch of stuff, install all of the software. And now when I type node-version, you should see that I actually have 0.10.3 ready to go, and npm-version is also a reasonably modern version of it and stuff. So with that, we have Node.js installed on our Mac machines, and we're ready to start playing around with it.